Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Bree Kirsch, and I'll be the moderator for this session titled AI Icing on the Cake, LLM-focused workshops to support reflective learning and executive functioning skills and build campus partnerships. Before we begin, we have a few reminders. We have the code of conduct that we'll adhere to for this conference, and I am pasting the link in the chat. So please contact us via Gale Conference Support at googlegroups.com if you have any concerns. Please be sure your microphone is muted. And then please, at the end of the presentation, there will be time for questions. Please put those in the chat and I will help ask them at the end of the session. And then the session is being recorded. You can enable captions by clicking on the Show Captions button at the bottom of the screen. It is my pleasure to introduce Eloise Stevens, the Student Success Librarian at the University of Rochester, where she gets to collaborate with some fantastic students and colleagues. Outside of work, she enjoys watching leaves rustle in the wind and baking and woodworking. Please join me in welcoming Eloise Stevens.
Hi. Thank you all so much for having me and for joining us for this session. As you can see, I'm one of those librarians who can suffer from get everything in the title itis. I have an alternative title we'll see later. But first I wanted to thank Bree for that introduction and for moderating that session. And thank you all for joining us. We are also going to start with some reflection because while we will go through what I made with others based on consultation and needs and ideas, what I'm really hoping is that this might inspire some reflections on your practices, opportunities to think about how you might adapt this or other sessions in finding opportunities for collaboration and thinking about how we are weaving together different conversations and opportunities for teaching and learning on our campus. So we have some questions on the screen. I am also sharing them in the chat. This is a resource document that has these questions. It has links to some of the resources that we'll be going through today. But for now, I wanted to give us just a little bit of time. Oh, I'm so sorry. I went too far. I apologize for that. So here are the reflection questions. And that tiny URL will lead you to the Word document that I just shared in the chat. So I'm going to set a timer for 3 minutes for us to think about these questions. And please feel free, if you are comfortable, sharing some of your thoughts in the chat so we can see where there might be overlaps or opportunities that might also get our thoughts going. So timer is set. So just a few more seconds. Thank you all so much for taking the time to engage with those questions. I saw a diversity of answers. I wasn't even able to keep up with everything that came into the chat, but I saw some things like there's no shared definition of either AI literacy or even centralized conversations around AI on campus, that stakeholders aren't necessarily involved. Most of the conversations tend to focus on misuses of AI. And I saw a few people mention that they're challenged in how to engage their colleagues who are AI skeptics, which is great because I am an AI skeptic. So maybe this framework or thinking a little bit about the thought process that I went through in creating this might sort of lead a pathway towards conversations with people like me who are a little bit on the Luddite side. So with that, welcome to AI-cing on the Cake, Finding Sweet Opportunities, new, shorter title. My name is Eloise Stevens, and I work as the Student Success Librarian at the University of Rochester, as mentioned. So this is mostly a, hey, I did something, take a look type of presentation, but the hope is to be explicit about context and some of the larger frameworks and thoughts that were running through my brain to make it easier to thoughtfully adapt this session or create something new based off of local needs. So looking ahead, I'll be discussing a bit of what led to this session, which is, as you see what I mean with me and titles, finding your path, making a plan for your assignments with assignment calculators and ChatGPT. We'll go through the session, talk a little bit about what it looks like, where it's taught, where you can download it if you want to adapt it, or think about something new that might work best for your instructional context. And then I'm hoping that there'll be time for us to have some reflection at the end, or at least, things that you can start thinking about as you go on with the rest of your busy day. Thinking about the goals and the values that shape how you teach and the opportunities and partnerships available to you. So, as mentioned, at the Student Success Librarian at the University of Rochester, what does that mean? University of Rochester is a medium, largish R1 university in urban environment. About half the student population is undergraduates, and we have a large proportion of our student population are international students. And when I met with a student late last summer, he told me that the thing that sort of solidified that he was coming to UR was in the FAQ. One of the questions is it true that all UR students are nerds? And when you open it to answer it, it starts, yes. He was like, yes, that's when I knew it was for me. And then he went on to tell me about how when he was flying to Rochester for his freshman year, he then tried to use his observations to recalculate the circumference of the Earth, his observations from the plane. And for me, coming from smaller institutions, there are a lot of offices and resources to potentially connect students with, which can be a great opportunity, but also a challenge in thinking about how navigating large institutions may be an information problem in and of itself, right? So how can, or is it appropriate for librarians to help adapt to that and help support students through that without acting as concierge or counselor? And so in my role as student success librarian, that means my work includes learning from students through outreach, through needs assessment, building relationships with different academic support services offices, and working with colleagues to identify and find ways to remove barriers to often library services and resources and support. But we know that sometimes a lot of our work is broader than that. Sometimes when we are meeting with a student, we know that they need a writing tutor or a counselor or they need someone to walk them over to the food bank. So that is something that I'm also mindful of, especially in trying to collaborate with other academic offices. I'm gonna take a drink. It is warm in here post thunderstorm. It was just raining a little bit. So to reflect on my own perspective on teaching, when I was a baby librarian, I had the meta literacy book, and that was one of the first library books I read in my career. I was then the instruction and outreach librarian at a small liberal arts school. So meta literacy, many of you may be familiar with it already. It's a pre-framework reconception of information literacy. This is how I understand it. That focus on the need for critical evaluation and personal reflection in thinking about how we navigate different information communities. And that's what especially, two of the things I especially liked about it was that idea that we all exist within different information ecosystems. And each of these environments that we find ourselves in have different needs, different norms that we should and can be thinking about as we're thinking about how to use, access, evaluate information. So this comes from the current set of meta literacy learning goals. Reflect on your identity as an active learner within evolving information environments. Critically evaluate and ethically produce information, reflecting on your roles and impact across platforms. Contribute informed and ethical perspectives in collaborative social settings, and develop continuous learning strategies throughout a meta-literate mindset. So these and the overall theory are quite influenced by theories of metacognition in learning, as well as the rise of Web 2.0 communities. And each of these goals has different objectives that are tagged as being in one or more domains: affective, behavioral, cognitive, and metacognitive. So within this framework of thinking, and within other expanded definitions of information literacy, we're often challenged, or I think about that we are often challenged by the opportunity that we're almost always teaching information literacy within the context of other learning and immediate needs. So I might be working with an art history class and think that this particular class, this particular assignment could be a really cool time to think about and talk about critiquing institutional knowledge by looking at how the British Museum describes some of the provenance of its collections. And the professor might be, yeah, that sounds great. But that doesn't change the fact that the students are still within the context of needing to find 3 scholarly sources, and many of them are new to art history research. So in teaching information literacy, there's a wealth of perspectives on how we might balance those immediate needs while supporting capital I, capital L information literacy development. And where might be those opportunities to be explicit about how critical thoughts and mindsets can serve us all across different contexts, not just for one assignment, not just within academia. So this, of course, mirrors broader conversations that libraries and campuses are having about student success and education, but this is maybe one of our slices of it. So in my first year, my new role, which I'm currently 11 months and 2 days into, I hope to be able to connect with other academic support offices, listen for opportunities to really nurture those relationships and listen for student needs, and then learn more about this place that I find myself in and what might be the needs within this context. And then, of course, one more side path. As I mentioned, we know the word Luddite is now used somewhat derisively to describe someone who's not with the times. Now, I know I'm in a Zoom room with people who are smart, who are statistically more likely to have had a history degree in some way, and statistically more likely than average probably to know the origins of words. But this was something that I had to learn myself. Historically, the Luddites were the name given to a labor movement of textile workers in northwestern England. Thank you for the laugh emoji. During the Industrial Revolution. So these workers weren't outright anti-technology. They were weavers, and there's documentation that a lot of them use these new technologies themselves. But a major point of the contention was not necessarily just the new technology, but also that this was happening at the time that there was new structures for capital and investment, as well as less regulation around these technologies and capital, which meant that there was questions of who is this technology going to benefit. So the Luddites staged their protests and broke things that they dubbed machinery hurtful to commonality, pointing to potentially issues of social organization and not just issues of technology. So anyway, thinking back to those reflection questions, one of those common challenges or opportunities that I see is that information literacy is taught in the context of. So how do we build those opportunities to be explicit and intentional about things like reflection, critical evaluation, and that sort of learning the different tools in our toolkit around learning. And I am especially curious and interested about how generative AI can be used thoughtfully to center and expose human labor. And also even outside of generative AI, how can we just identify the ways in which these tools are already being implemented upon us, right? We know so many of the search platforms that we use now use or have generative AI features. And just, I think, even unveiling that can be super helpful. But I do remain skeptical of some of the impacts of generative AI under current dominant paradigms. And that's sort of a contradiction that I myself have to work in thinking about how to discuss these with my colleagues and with students. So back in the fall, I had a meeting. It was sort of an introduction meeting with the Office of Disability Resources. I was new, many of them were new. And at the end of the meeting, one of the access coordinators mentioned to me, I think we should have an assignment calculator because I tell students that I work with to use the University of Minnesota's all the time. And I think it would be more helpful if it was a UR tool that I was leading them to. And I was like, okay, we can have those conversations. I'm looking forward to learning more about this. And I wasn't quite sure about jumping into an assignment calculator, but at least gathering some more information about how students are using these tools, how they're being promoted, and if there's ways to sort of accompany, right? So if we're telling students, here's a link to the University of Minnesota assignment calculator that might be helpful in developing a plan for your assignment, that we are also saying, and here's a list of the resources that they might recommend to Minnesota students and the analogous resources here. Then I met with a colleague to share this. My wonderful colleague, Lara Nicosia, she was a little bit skeptical of adding more assignment calculators to the world. I think having a little bit of experience with the maintenance that goes into them. And she sort of mentioned, because she was looking into AI tools in different types of assignments, that this is something that AI is kind of good at, right? Developing a plan and a schedule. And so I did a little bit of experimentation, met with the access coordinator from the Office of Disability Resources, who recommended that we also loop in a colleague from the Learning Center. So now we have 3 different departments collaborating on this, developed the guide, and implemented it. So to go back to our reflection questions, Mary Beth saw this challenge and this opportunity that students were struggling with executive functioning and that they might benefit from having locally relevant tools to support assignment planning. Lara saw an opportunity to support AI literacy instead of having the library potentially program and maintain a new tool. So now we will go over the session a little bit, and I will reshare in the chat the list of resources for those who have joined most recently. Not anti-technology, anti-exploitation. Excellent comment. Thank you, Rebecca. And so this resource list has a link to the LibGuide and the Figshare, where we can sort of explore what this session looked like. Here's the LibGuide. We have this wonderful slides front and center. We have a feedback survey that we'll touch base on towards the end. And then the other tabs are resources to support and structure your work. This is where we have information about assignment calculators, as well as those campus resources that assignment calculators might mention. And then in using AI to support and structure your work, at the very top, we have I think this is a ThingLink example prompt. So this is something that students might create to help create a personalized assignment plan with these little stars saying why we included that. We also, of course, have the plain text and then the make your own prompt worksheet. This is something that students turn in to at the end of the session when it is taught in the context of a class. But to quickly go through a little bit of the structure of the slides, we start with reflection, and this is super important to me and to my collaborators in thinking about not only how can we make AI more locally useful than the University of Minnesota's assignment calculator, but potentially more personally useful. And this actually drove a lot of really great conversation with students, because after we practiced using a assignment calculator and started constructing a prompt, they had really thoughtful things to say about, well, as I was thinking about what makes me stick to a plan, I didn't really see this, so maybe I would add this as well, which was really great because it at least seemed that students were ready, willing, and able to take control of their own learning. This session starts with a little bit of pulling the curtain back on executive functioning and the idea that when we are in school, we are learning a lot of things that we are not really explicit about, right? How to navigate complex systems, how and when to ask for help, impulse control that took me a while to learn when I was in college, how to work with different types of people, as well as the things that we know that we're learning, like calculus or how to construct or deconstruct an argument. Then we introduce assignment calculators and then have students practice an assignment calculator. This required a little bit of coordination with the professors who were teaching the strategies for student success course in which this was taught ahead of time, because we wanted to make sure that students had an assignment either from that course or one that they were in conversation about with the faculty member about, okay, here's how I might use AI for this class. It's just to develop a plan. It's not to write the paper. Is this okay, Professor so-and-so? But the students came to class with an assignment so that they could practice developing a plan. First with an assignment calculator, then we did a little bit of reflection. Then we talked a little bit about the potential of using ChatGPT specifically as an assignment calculator. And so in this, of course, we discussed within the LibGuide some of this ethical and social considerations of AI. For instance, in the AI uses resources, in both of the class sessions that I was able to teach this in the spring, we see here that it's comparing water usage to a traditional Google search. And we know that Google likely now uses more water because of the AI integrations. And in both those classes, there was in each of them a student that volunteered, oh, do you know if you swear in your Google search, they won't include the AI stuff, which I thought was also quite interesting that, the students were eager to participate and share these sort of hacks for navigating those information systems. In addition to this, I also stressed that one of the reasons that I personally would never use generative AI to develop content for my academic work is that it is meant to do what it, or I'm sorry, I'm not as careful with my language here as I could be, that these programs are programmed to give you what you are asking for more than give you the truth. And so for my example, I open up a new chat and I say, unicorns are real. I am writing a biology paper at the college level about the physiology and special characteristics of unicorns. Please give me 3 paragraphs with those citations. And I think in this case, leading into the absurd has helped in supporting some of that thoughtfulness of seeing how our own biases might be things that we put into those machines and then they come back out. Then we ask students to review their assignment and create and construct a prompt based off of their understanding of the task ahead, as well as that reflection that they did at the beginning. And so then after that, and of course, we stress that if this is something that they are comfortable with. And so for the assignment that instructors may assign afterwards, they can give them a few options of, okay, here's the reflection assignment if you only use the assignment calculator. Here's the reflection assignment if you did use ChatGPT. And that content is in the Figshare, where I think the outline for assignment, or no, this is the outline for the session. My apologies, the post-session assignment. So we are stressing that idea of reflection and of customizing any plan that generative AI may have created for you. Really quickly to touch upon that exit survey, and of course, this was optional, and one of the classes that I was able to teach this in this spring only had 3 students, so our numbers are quite low, but it was interesting to see that no students had used an assignment calculator before today. It wasn't so surprising that ChatGPT was the most commonly used prior to today's session, with 2 students having also used Copilot. And then in thinking about what students found helpful, it was kind of heartening to see that at least in the moment, no one said nothing. Most students picked 2 or 3 things, and I seemed that they most appreciated discussing how they use AI in their work, the different considerations, at least from what they were communicating. There was a great deal of sort of thoughtfulness in that idea of thinking contextually about how they might use different tools. Then they also appreciated practice. And then it was nice to see that the lecture on executive functioning is something that students also seem to find somewhat helpful. So looking ahead, this has been really great, mostly, I think, for just that relationship building in this position, right? I was able to work with the Office of Disability Resources and with folks in the Learning Center at the University of Rochester within my first year, because as we're thinking about this sort of discomfort or this disorganization or mixed messaging that might be feeling about artificial intelligence on the institutional level, we know that the library staff is probably not alone in that. So being able to connect with other academic support offices was fantastic. And it may have been tied to having other opportunities to collaborate where, you hear something like, oh yeah, Robin said that, you made this really cool session that, is going to be taught here, or the folks in the Office of Disability Resources are creating a new orientation session for incoming students, and they're hoping that this can be a part of this, so that's great. Of course, want to also stress continuous improvement. We know that the landscape is changing quite frequently, so even just today, as I was looking through this, earlier this spring, these guidelines for generative AI in education at the University of Rochester, which don't seem to be loading right now, but they weren't created when this session was created. So that form of updating is super important. And then, of course, hoping to continue to look ahead to find additional opportunities, additional contexts in which to collaborate and support this sort of thoughtful, reflective practice. So thank yous to Lara Nicosia, wonderful colleague, Mary Beth Kitzel. She was the access coordinator who instigated this collaboration. Robin Fry was a great collaborator and also helped bridge us to that Strategies for Academic Success course in which this session was taught. Thank you to Arinze Amanekwe and Aura D. Panda, who were the two graduate students who are also course instructors that were willing to try something new this semester. Very grateful to them. Kristen Tottleben helped me make this a OER. So it is Creative Commons license, just with a by. So feel free to adapt and use it as you see fit. And of course, thank you to the students that I was able to work with, and my mom, the universe, anyone else I might be forgetting. And of course, I did go on a little bit more than anticipated, but I really hope that at some point later today, or that you have the opportunity to keep some of these questions in mind in thinking about what are the opportunities that are out there. And even if none of us are quite experts, that we might be able, I mean, you might be an expert. I don't feel like I'm an expert, but what are the opportunities to be thoughtful about where we're coming from and where our goals might overlap in meeting student needs and really empowering students to be thoughtful and reflective in a way that matters and is really relevant to them at this moment, in knowing that AI is everywhere. And we want to be able to tell them, not just don't use this to write your papers, but here's what it might be good at to sort of support your learning, your growth as a person and as a scholar. So thank you very much for your time and attention in this. I see there's a question in the chat. Thank you.
Yes.
Anonymous, yeah.
There are several chat. Well, there was one chat question earlier and one in the Q&A. So for those that have questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A. It's your choice. The one in the Q&A feature is, was this a course or a one-shot?
Yep. So right now, this is just a one-shot session that is taught within the Strategies for Academic Success course. I am looking forward to potentially including it with an orientation session, or to teach it as a workshop. Of course, then there's always the question, if you build it, will anyone come? But right now it is a one-shot in that Strategies for Academic Success course. And I think there is the potential to collaborate with some of those graduate students who think about, because they seem to really care about reflection as well with learning. So is there an opportunity to deepen that collaboration? Maybe looking forward for those different opportunities.
Thank you, Eloise. And I did notice a few people in the chat earlier when they were responding to some of your questions. Some of them came up with, how do we engage AI skeptics and faculty who are openly hostile? So I don't know if you want to address that question at all.
Yeah, open hostility is different than skepticism, right? I think we've, as mentioned, I am, an AI skeptic, and I think most of us, and I won't, but I know many of us who might be here have some level of skepticism about how, if not the tools themselves, how they're employed, how they're marketed, right? And so if there's any way that you can use your own authentic thoughts and feelings as a bridge to skeptics, to say, I understand, even if we're not thinking the exact same thing, I have seen the misuses of AI as well. And part of this educational goal is to provide an alternative, so it's not just an abstinence only form of education, right? It's here's how we can be thoughtful. Here's how we can be safe, so we're not sharing all our, personal information or our research data. And here's what these tools are good at, and here's what these tools aren't necessarily going to do. To a certain extent, that can be a really empowering thing for learners, I hope, in thinking about, we all have this beautiful human consciousness, which is powerful and mysterious. And we want to value that, right? And we can't say, or we can't sort of just ban the tools that are everywhere, especially when we know that it's already integrated into Google, it's already integrated into our ebook platforms, right? But thinking about how can we be thoughtful about that, I think can help support that skepticism. Hostility, I mean, if someone's, depends on what that means, right? If someone's throwing a drink in your face at a library faculty meeting, you should not engage with them.
Well, hopefully none of us are dealing with that level of hostility.
Hopefully not, yes.
Thank you for answering those questions. At this point, I'm not seeing any additional questions, but please, if anyone does have additional questions for Eloise, please put those in the chat or the Q&A function. And if Eloise is open to it, we can continue the conversation in Discord.
Sure. I don't know if I've joined the Discord for the conference. I was gonna say, in that resource sheet, I shared my email is at the bottom, and I will find and join the Discord for this conference. So thank you for letting me know about that.
There are instructions for those that need them on the website, the conference website, but I can also try to post them in the chat quickly as well. Give me a moment to get those. But if anyone has any other questions for Eloise, please feel free to put those in the chat and share them. I did just post the instructions to go to the Discord server, and I don't think it saved the invite. So let me copy the link and post it in the chat as well. So that's the invite, and you can follow that to get to the Discord. And there are tabs for each of these sessions. So if you want, you can go to the tab that says MON-3PM-Stevens, and we can continue the conversation there. I did already post a link to the resource list that Eloise shared.
Great.
Oh, we have another question. Are there any other similar workshops you're planning?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm currently redoing a note-taking session that we teach to try to include a little bit more reflection. AI isn't a part of that. So I will say my process, I tend to be quite more responsive than spontaneous in my work processes. So I am looking forward to having future conversations, where things might pop up and sparks might fly in my brain and other people's brain. But there's nothing that I'm planning. Is there anything that you are planning, Cyrus? Apologies.
And if you have anything to add in the chat, feel free to do so. They said, well done with the name.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions at this point in time, but thank you so much, Eloise, for your presentation. I think we all gained a lot from it and are looking forward to digging into those resources you shared. And so unless there are any questions from our participants, I'll wait a couple more seconds. Otherwise, we can close the session a couple minutes early and we can relax for the rest of the day, and hope to see all of you back tomorrow for our second day of the conference.
Thank you so much for joining, and thank you for having me, and thank you, Bree, for moderating.
You're welcome. All right, I'm just seeing lots of clapping.
Oh, resume and cover letter workshop. That would be interesting. I think that would be a great potential collaboration with career offices, because I think that's another area where we know that AI tools are being used to review things, but we want to be careful about how we use AI to represent ourselves when applying. That's great. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you all.